August 12th meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission. We're meeting in a hybrid format tonight here in the trailer at 131 Pleasant Street. And we also have itinerary plans are online. Ms. Blanchett, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Here. Ms. Karen?
Yes.
And I would like to welcome our newest commissioner, Mr. Mike Levitt. Welcome. Thank you. This meeting is being both audio and video recorded, and please identify yourself and speak through the chair. Are there any questions, comments, concerns with the agenda as published? Hearing none, we'll consider that adopted by unanimous consent. Are there any questions, concerns, corrections to the draft minutes from July 8th? Hearing none, we consider those adopted by unanimous consent. We have to ratify the June 30th and July 23rd warrants. Are there any questions or such a motion? Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Ms. Blanchard.
Aye.
Marks. Aye. Ms. Barron.
Aye.
Loretta.
I can only approve the ones for the 23rd since the ones for the 30th was prior to my agenda.
And to make that note, and the chair votes aye. Is there any public comment for items that are not otherwise on the agenda? Okay, no public. We will move on to timing uses and contracts set forth on exhibit 1, and I'll turn that over to Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. I was with you guys again every month. Glad to see you. Going down the list, the first one we have is Bestow Enterprises, also known as Fresh Air Services. It is amendment to expand permitted use for their license agreement. Just to kind of give a backstory for Commissioner Levitt. Fresh Air Services provides aircraft cleaning services for our general aviation customers that come on in, and Slate Aviation reached out to them to ask if they could handle the new security requirements that are been set forth by the TSA for the 12-5 program. Aircraft that are 12,500 pounds MTOW or larger, and moving passengers now require additional screening. And they were trying to find somebody who's local to the island, who lives here, makes it a lot easier to find housing. And they reached out to Fresh Air Services and asked if they would be willing to provide that security detail. We think that there's no conflict of interest there. That also allows him to expand his business. But furthermore, we also have interest with other 12-5 operators that would like to do business potentially next year. So that continues to grow. This opens the door for them to be able to provide those services to those other airlines should ask for this help. So license just to remember to offer those services. The second one is a contract with Aero Specialties. This is to procure 2 new ground power units. This will help with our ramp management plan to minimize the amount of APU usage and APU time, running time on the ramp. We currently do not have a GPU that can handle the large aircraft, the Globals, the 650s, 700s. And this will be able to provide those services for them. Currently, they claim that they can't power down their aircraft. They have to keep them running, which of course goes longer than the 15 APU minutes that we have asked for on our end. And so these are desperately needed. So this contract is to procure 2 of those for the ramp operations. The third one is contract amendment with McFarland Johnson for the airport master plan task order. We are getting near the final stages of the master plan. However, we're going to need to extend it just a little bit, the contract a little bit more. We're not fully done with it. So that's just a contract amendment for that to extend it for another year. The next one is a contract with Computer Assisted Services. The airport's IT contract expired on June 30th. And we are pleased to continue having Computer Assisted Services be our go-to IT provider. With this new contract for them, they were chosen through the RFP process, and gives them another 3-year lease agreement to provide our services for us. He's very knowledgeable with the flight information display system, the gate information display system, and the PA systems that we have in the airport. So yeah, pleased to have Scott will continue to help us. The next one is contract with McFarland Johnson. It's a task order for continued botanical monitoring. That's of course required through our continued environmental monitoring as outlined by the FAA. And the last contract is with Pavion Corporation, also formerly, I think also, that's formerly Pavion, currently I think called Signet, if I'm right, or do I have that backwards?
That's cool.
No,
Okay.
backwards.
Got it
Backwards, yeah.
Formerly Signet Pavion, okay, got it. They provide, the services for security cameras and doors. So a quick update, about a week and a half ago, the door systems in the terminal kind of went haywire and were causing the alarms to go off on a pretty regular basis, pretty much every 5 minutes. It seemed to be kind of stuck in a networking loop issue. The technician came out and tried to diagnose the problem. He was unable to. In that moment, however, he was able to fix the door issue to a degree to get it stabilized so it wasn't continually alarming and making the guests a little freaked out that were the patrons in the airport with the alarms going off. But at the same time, the security cameras were having an issue and they continue to have an issue. They continue to have some network loop issue. They do believe that the switches are the fault. And so we need to replace the 6 switches for the security cameras, also the doors. So that's what this contract is for. We have $17,000. I think that is all of them on the list. And so I ask for your approval for these contracts and these amendments.
Thank you. Are there any questions or anyone want to discuss any of the items? Please come on.
So just a question on the, looks like one of the electric, GPUs is electric and one's, diesel. Is
That's
that
correct.
Yeah, electric ones.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we're gonna charge the, that's cost for that?
Yeah,
What's the additional cost for that, like?
I talked to, before we went down that road, getting going with one electric and one diesel. I talked to Jay-Z Electric, Harris Grove. And we've got phase 3 power going into the R station and we'd be able to power there and or the GSC garage, the current small little garage that we have. It's got 3-phase power going in there. And we just have to put in whatever receptacle the company has. So you have the power to do so.
I have the same question. Anyone else?
I have a question on the IT contract. I hope this is a typo. On exhibit B, it says that the response time is a minimum of 4 hours. Shouldn't that be a maximum of 4 hours?
No, I think the minimum is 4 hours that we want to be on site in the event of an emergency. We had a lot of interest from other entities that were not even in the state. And of course, that can pose security issues as we have to have certain security measures in place for TSA regulations. So we need to have quasi instantaneous, on-site professionals there and you have issues. And so it would be a minimum of 4 hours that we need to have them here. So is that a typo? Or
Well, it reads that they will respond with a minimum of 4 hour response time.
correct. But they have 4 hours to respond to in the event we have system failure or whatnot. We know because our security staff are on hand and they'll know when stuff goes down. So
Okay,
they're calling them.
maybe I'm confused. I would normally see that they have to be there within 4 hours. It could be a maximum of 4 hours response time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
We can have a look and correct the contract.
Or response time shall not exceed, 4 hours.
4 hours.
Yeah.
I don't know the intent.
That's the intent, right?
That is correct,
Yeah,
yeah.
let's just
Okay.
make sure that's clear. That's a good point.
And then within the statement of work, and I don't know if this is an appropriate place to have the conversation, but I was a little concerned when it talked about the servers that they're being required to maintain. It lists the Windows Small Business Server. Microsoft ended support on that in January of 2020. They haven't been issuing security or patches for it. Same thing with the Windows 12 server. And Windows 10 sunsets in October. So it may be what we have now, and we certainly want them to support it. But I'd like to know that we're getting upgrades that are going to have current batteries.
And and that's correct. So in our last commission meeting, just for your information, we did approve 3 new servers that we have to upgrade. And so those will come when they come in new. Our IT guy actually installs the newest version of Windows. That's part of the contract. So they will come in with the most current software.
And are the workstations being upgraded to Windows 11?
Yes, they are. Okay, yeah, right.
Perhaps we also want to update that in the contract. That they can point that out. And there was also questions last time, which I don't know if you got any more information about the well time, since you just brought it up, about why we were gonna use on-site servers versus the cloud. And there was a thought of security related, but did we get any more information or?
No, I have it on my list and I'm waiting for the contract to be on place to ask our IT.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
I'd hate to see us buy physical servers and be, last year instead of looking forward to sort of next year, if you would, right? And what current use, if we can keep all of whatever we can keep that meets all security requirements, I mean, a virtual or cloud-based format, I think it makes more sense than buying hardware. So while we approved that, the purchases, if I understand it, haven't actually been,
Mhm.
is that correct?
I submitted this question to Mike Alvarez, who is the IT department head for the town. And his exact answer was that it wouldn't be financially viable for the airport to set up its own virtual environment. And if we were one day to go under the town and be part of their virtual servers, then it could be viable for us. Because I guess they have that system already set up, and he said they have over 25 virtual servers. So that was his short answer regarding that question. So I guess maybe it costs too much money to go over to virtual.
Well, I respectfully would say, I think that should be our decision. In terms of, it would be good for us to know what those finances are for us to make that decision. We may, I think, as a commission and as a manager, decide that that's money well spent.
Yeah, we could run our hard servers in the virtual.
Yeah.
I think if you're gonna do that, I think then the others, not that we design the IT system here today, but if you're gonna do that, then I feel like the connection point, you have to keep it good, right? So what I mean by that is if you go to a virtual situation, then you have Comcast, for example, as your primary internet, and then you have what Starlink as a backup. And they will talk to each other seamlessly, so that, that way you don't.
For redundancy.
Redundancy to a remote server. Just as a thought, I mean, that's.
I'm not aware of any IT environments in the business world that where anybody's buying hard servers, and anytime a financial analysis is done, there were too many vendors out there providing server farms or offer online services, and if it looks like, for instance, this maintenance contract, we pay them on an hourly basis. We wouldn't be paying anybody to maintain a physical server here, since that would be taken care of by the service provider.
That makes sense.
So my sense is, unless there's disagreement, we could move forward with the contract with an understanding that we don't want the servers purchased without more information as to possibly upgrading to a virtual.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
And I think that should be then part of his current new contract then for him to do that.
To do the
To-
investigation
and transfer,
consulting to
yeah.
us.
I think so. I mean, we don't have any other IT person available at the airport.
You might want to find out if he's done that before, but you don't want to do his first.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what his level of that is, but.
Well, it's an hourly, we could keep on this, and if we need an additional consulting contract for that, then we could engage somebody, I think.
There are local people here to do that. We gotta have some, hopefully, let's see.
Our, our other airport applications, run virtually is the Exchange server, virtual, Office 365.
I really don't know. I'm not close happy to know. You might know.
So we are running Office 365. I use it all the time. That's all cloud based. So I was gonna mention that. I know Skylar is very well up to
Yes,
speed
yeah.
with Microsoft and that service. DOT is also all cloud based, and that is 90% of everything the operation does out there. They do through DOT, and that's in the cloud. So I think it's more of a question along the lines of the security footage and where it's being stored.
That's what I was gonna
and
ask.
Physical servers versus
Yeah.
a virtual setting.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
Because everything else
I think we need to
doing
ask
can be
Rob.
utilized in the cloud.
We need to ask Rob what the TSA regulations would be with, you know, disk space and how long that would make. We need to have all of this. Or, you know, so.
I
let me
think
ask
the key
Rob.
thing, the key question is, right?
Yeah.
What do we need the hard disk for?
Yeah, exactly.
Why are we even use, what are we using it
Exactly.
for? And then are there alternatives that could get us away from it?
I'll talk to Rob about that, because he wouldn't have the TSA regs on that.
And are all of your files on either a SharePoint or OneDrive?
OneDrive,
What, yeah.
OneDrive,
Not all of them, but a lot of them, I think.
like,
Is the reason some aren't?
I think it's at this point, I think it's probably a personal preference within the office. I do a lot of it. I store some stuff on our physical hard drive, our servers, and then I also throw it over there in case I need to have it, you know, out and about. Maria may be a little bit different on where she is storing a lot of her accounting stuff. Am I right?
but we do have the shared drive that
Yep.
it's,
Yeah.
so that's where
So I think
everything goes there.
yeah, a lot of stuff I do on my computer, even if maybe it's on the desktop, automatically uploads into 365. So that might be the answer. It's everything is there.
I think it's a policy
I
thing,
think,
really.
right, I think
It's a policy.
it's outside of the scope of the contract, but I think we just maybe these kind of things, discussions help to.
If you guys
Raise
decide,
points from, you know, for policy management. To streamline and look at that, because it's probably in this day and age, along with the cloud-based, the redundancy, the backup. Work with Skylar if you need an additional consultant to help develop that, then please bring that to us. And but I would just urge that we don't go forward with any purchases of actual hardware without getting into that study.
And if you're mirroring everything and backing it up to OneDrive with the client, it will eliminate the need for any type of backup system you have, as well as procedures. Since it's at the time they go and we have the security around and everything is that.
Our shared drive that everybody uses in the office, it's on a server downstairs in the basement, I know for sure, Because he had to restart that and it was,
I think we've got it out there, that we've got some work to do.
Yes,
there.
we do.
I think the contract, I think having Skylar in place, regardless of that, the services that he's provided and help them with the, infrastructure that's needed, and then if there is, because this raises a bit of a level, if there's something else that you need, bring forward another, contract and, or an amendment to his because of this additional scope of work, and we can discuss it. And I would expect, there seems to be a good amount of support there for that. I just don't go with just I think you really need to look at that.
Yeah, we'll
and
do.
I think what they're just talking right now with the OneDrive and all that stuff, that should fully install.
Definitely.
You should be able to take care of, when you guys decide, hey, this is where we wanna go, Skylar should really handle it.
Yeah, great. Okay. Were there any questions did that meet your, concerns with that contract? Any other questions or concerns? Any of the other contracts? Ms. Planner?
No.
Is there a motion to, approve the, pending leases, contracts, and agreement as set forth on exhibit 1?
So moved.
Motion we made and seconded. Ms. President, how do you vote?
Oh, aye.
Mr. Marks? Mr. Scanlon?
Aye.
Mr. Levitt? And Chair votes aye. And that brings us on to election of officers and to assign subcommittee members. Are there any nominations for that?
I'll nominate Arthur Vespero for chairman.
Any other nominations? Motion made and seconded. Thank you, for accepting. Doing the best job I can for all of you and for our community. Ms. Spencer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ross? Aye. Mr. Sparing? Aye. Wyatt? Aye. Thank you. Is there a nomination for vice chair?
I'll nominate Ms. Clancy if she's accepting.
Ms. Planzer, you accept that nomination?
Yes, I will.
Any other nominations? Hearing none. Mark, how do you vote? Aye. Mr. Sparing?
Aye.
Wyatt? Aye. And Chair votes aye. Planzer, thank you.
Aye.
I wanted to leave it whether it was up to you. That was unanimous. Thank you. The assigning of subcommittee members, we didn't have a list of our subcommittees, so
Thank
you
you.
do have a list too. Thank you. We actually haven't had, been really handling almost everything with, at a full commission level. But I think that, we could put these subcommittees again in place just in case. And I'll read them off, and if anybody has any questions or concerns or want to change it all, then we could go further into that. We have a long-range plans policy, subcommittee, airport policy, and facilities maintenance, and that was Mr. Marks, myself, and Ms. Planter. We had personnel, which was Mr. Riscaron and Mr. Levitt, if you'd be interested in that. I think did you just put Mr. Levitt in where Ms.
On
Coppell was?
Mr. Holmes, yeah.
So again, that this could shift around. And noise, environmental, energy was myself and Mr. Marks. Service and public relations would be Mr. Buscarin and Mr. Levitt, and finance would be all. So I mean, you where it is, you know, just throw it in, is there that work for you, or there are different committees you would be interested in? And again, we haven't. This would be outside of the norm, but for the most part, I think that, you have to, for the subcommittees, post the meetings, keep minutes and go through all that. My feeling is generally that, and then you come back to this meeting, we go over it all again. That, you know, I like to just handle it with everybody at the commission level, but, you know, if there was anything that came up, so. Would you like to see be on a different subcommittee or anything different, or we also could put this off a month or we could.
I think until I get a better sense of the rhythm of the commission and what each one does, this would be a fine place to start. And I assume if these aren't working out for me or anybody else, that there can be shifting time.
Certainly, yeah, I mean, anytime anybody can bring forward this, we always have, so you know, commissioners' comments as an agenda item at the end of every meeting. And that's the perfect place to bring up an item that you might want to have on the next meeting. So that we follow open meeting law and, you know, general comments of something to observe, it's fine, but if there was you always would come to me as well. I'll put anything on the agenda if there was something you want to change, but it's also at least there to say, I'm just thinking about. And perhaps at the next meeting, we could have a discussion, you know, about that's why it's. With that, I don't think we need a vote on the subcommittees if everybody is, okay with it as listed. Okay, thank you. The grant signing letter of authorization, that is.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I think you have to make a motion
For
to
the sub-
approve, yeah, for the subcommittee.
Is there a motion to approve the subcommittees, as, just listed out?
Second.
Ms. Blair, how do you vote?
Aye.
Marks, Mr. Sparing.
Aye.
Mr. Levitt, aye, and so votes aye. Thank you. Might as well make sure.
Yep.
And then we have a grant signing letter of authorization. Again, this is in years past, just to make sure the details of that of, do you have the details of that? I'm very interested in it. Or just, we'll go over. I might have it wrong. I have it right here, but, so it's, I just couldn't remember the amount, so, this letter is to
50,000.
authorize, the chair or the vice chair, to sign, on behalf of the entire commission on federal or state contracts, grants, other agreements totaling $50,000 or more, pertaining to projects previously approved by the entire commission. Any questions or further discussion on that? Is a motion to authorize the chair and vice chair to be authorized to sign those contracts.
Don't move.
Second is plan.
Aye.
So, Ms. Brown.
Aye.
Go ahead.
Aye.
Okay, that's aye, thank you. And I'm bring us on to pending matters, and I'll turn it over to Mayor Smith for the South Apron Ramp expansion project update.
So a couple of updates for the South Ramp Apron extension. McFarland Johnson is just awaiting final paperwork from RDO to basically close out this project, get their final payment to them. This included the work that they did on that airport fence movement, airport fence that just got moved by last month, 2 months ago, June. That's already August. That was done in June. But as that door closes, we're now opening the new door to the next phase of the project, and that's with the noise sound barrier wall construction. We have the kickoff meeting scheduled for this Thursday to begin that conversation, the scheduling. As I mentioned in the last commission meeting, Premier Fence won that bid. And so they'll be in attendance along with McFarland Johnson and airport management to just start the discussions. And they're also going to be on site to get their badges, to start the application and put badges. So very pleased about that. So that's all I have for this update. So moving on to
Just sorry, any questions? I think we could probably take this off of the regular agenda and instead replace it with fence updates under the manager's report as appropriate. Please keep us posted.
Where'd you start with?
I want to say it's in the fall. We don't have an exact date, right? For the wall.
For the noise wall, I think we're shooting for this fall, if not
It's fall.
early spring.
Mr. Larson is online
Still has
if you
it.
want.
There
I
he is.
joined late,
There he is.
sorry. So, yes, we are having a kickoff meeting for the wall, and at that meeting, we'll discuss with them. And obviously with you, when you want it to be constructed, but also if they have long lead term items that they have to order, that's going to preclude them from doing any meaningful construction until the spring.
And ideally, we're hoping that it'll be ready before next season.
That's the idea, yes.
So, anything that, even if it's, I understand mobilization, but if there is an initial phase that could happen with their materials, I think just making sure the contractor is aware of our desire for that to be, I know that the contract allowed for more time. But that we're really hopeful for prior to next summer season.
Yeah, the hope is that they would drill and install all the foundations this fall
Yeah,
while they're ordering and waiting for the wall parts to come for the spring, and then put those up once the foundation cures, start putting those up.
what I was thinking. Great. All right, so no further questions on South Ramp, move on.
Oh, we have complaints about noise from your neighbors.
Yeah,
Noisy.
I'll get to those later. PFAS. Yeah, so for PFAS, I'd like to turn the time over to our environmental coordinator, Madison Collins, with a brief update. And then afterward, I had asked for Mina Macarios with Anderson and Krieger to also provide a little bit more update on the PFAS remediation and phasing portion.
Collins?
Great.
Welcome.
Thank you. All right, so for some PFAS updates, the first one is that groundwater sampling, it has started at Airport Gas and at Statue Park, and this started in late July. This is just to help us get a better scope of where we want to do certain remediation practices and tactics for our phase 4. We are also in the process of creating a PFAS dashboard. And so that dashboard, similarly how you get the PFAS table in every commission meeting that talks about if which properties have been added to well water or to bottled water. This will help us also just create a way to update that in live and as a living document. Another update is that we are continuing the discussions to pursue whether or not to pursue the using the terminal geothermal system as part of our PFAS treatment system in phase 4. This system would be a key part of phase 4 remedial design if we choose to go forward with that. And then another project that we are starting on or starting to review is that we got 2 bids on our projects to clean up the ARF trucks and to appropriately dispose of AFFF. Those bids were from Clean Harbors and a company called Revive. And then lastly, we did receive our task order authorization to test HALT in our fuel farm. And that you might have also seen in one of the newspapers on the island.
That's all.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions. I don't know if anybody else did as well, but I noticed in the report that we still have 4 residences receiving bottled water. And do we have plans? Are they not? Do they not have access to town water to connect?
I might have to defer to Jim if he's on the call, but I could get back to you.
Me. You can get back to it. If you don't have it, the answer, it's fine. It's just, I think that as we move towards sort of the end of this, if there's an ability to connect, we want to investigate that if we're providing bottled water. So that's just something I'd be interested in.
And through you, Mr. Chair, I do believe one of them, she is hooked up. However, we granted continual delivery of bottles for this summer. She was still a little hesitant with her new system. And I said that that's fine for the summer, so that one should drop off here by next year.
Okay, so the other 3, I think we want to, move to some resolution here. We don't want to, if there's an ability to get those connected. So what's happening there? I think it would help to sort of wrap on that side of what we've been doing for PFAS. And you mentioned the HALT system, and I did see that in the year report. When do you anticipate that is going to start?
I think I'd have to look at it again, but I want to say it said the spring of 2026 is when we'd start that project.
And then you also mentioned the further investigation of the scrubbing of the using the geo wells. Do you have, or was the last any further information on that?
So,
Not.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna let Richard Lawson step in on that one. You know more of the technical background on that question.
That's okay. Mr. Chair, I've spoken with the airport manager about setting up a meeting internally, possibly with you and one other commissioner to sort of have more discussions on that topic. I think it's worth having a meeting to discuss more and figure out exactly where we want to go and what are the options of getting there.
Okay. When do you think that might happen?
Over the next week, if you guys have time.
Yeah, truly, if next week works or the week after, that's fine.
Okay, so we're talking about the next couple of weeks and then
Yeah.
we can report back at the next commission meeting. That's anytime before the next meeting, before the master plan presentation. I would like to have some understanding of direction, what those options might be, and if that's something that we can incorporate into this.
I just had a general question about this phase 4 with the remediation, and is there enough information out there to understand the I don't mean to say that when I say this, I don't mean to be cheap about it, but the cost to benefit ratio or actually that benefit of each type of remediation that is proposed within the state, phase 4, whether it's digging up soils and disposing of them, or this reclamation project grant that we got the environmental project versus the geo versus whatever else that you guys are considering. Just kind of curious if, not tonight per se, but to get a sense of what that looks like. Is to, to clean it up. I just find it difficult that I just trying to understand that in my head around it. Where I lead, and I think that that's the best way to recover it, but I'm not sure I'm right. I'm just curious if you have any other knowledge of the other methods and if they are better at it or not.
Is that for me, Mr. Mark?
Yeah, please. Mr.
Yes,
Ladner.
Okay, so there's two different sort of items here. There's the phase 4, which is the next phase of the overall PFAS project. And then there is a sort of a separate discussion on the geothermal wells. So there are multiple options that Weston has come up with for phase 4 for the overall program at the airport, which have to do with water and soil and a variety of ways of treating them. And then the geothermal is a separate discussion.
I guess I wonder, we don't have to get, this is, I think maybe good for why they would be really separate. It would seem to me that, if we're looking at the potential options of scrubbing the water, for lack of a better term, that is essentially coming through our system, maybe not even changing it, right? Maybe it's just, a filter or a unit, if you would, that is inserted within that existing flow pattern. Why that wouldn't be separate from phase 4 in terms of remediation. And that might be a Weston question, and it might not, but that is what I would be wondering, why it would be segmented out.
It's only separate in that the overall PFAS issue at the airport has multiple hotspots that you have to treat multiple hotspots. You couldn't just treat the whole airport through the geothermal system.
I understand. So what you're saying is, we're gonna need to use multiple remedy options to meet the regulatory requirements.
For the whole entire airport, as opposed to the discussion we're having specific to the geothermal.
Remarks?
I just wanted to I'm just curious if it's part of the phase 4, and I know at the, one of the meetings they discussed about adding additional wells in one of the hot spots to help clean that up through the system. So if we're gonna invest, all I'm thinking of is if we're gonna invest in the system to clean up the geo well part of it, which may include reversing them to draw back the water from where we spread it out over there. Back in, once we've cleaned up the supply where we are now. And then if we added additional wells out, I think it's 1.5 there, to draw that into it, to clean that up. And that's where I was leading with my question. Is this a better way to clean it up? And I'm not saying it's the only way. I'm just wondering in the grand scheme of all the hot spots. And I guess I was just looking for a better overall understanding of where they all are, and why you would pick one here and one there. And maybe this isn't the right place for that.
And I think this is part of the discussion I'd like to have in the next week or so to sort of focus in a little more on what where we're going, where you as the commissioner going, as I say, where we're going.
Yeah.
And then as we are working on phase 4, Mr. Vicarius, would you care to update us some information, please?
Yes, good evening, everyone. So on the phase 4, there was some discussion with DEP about the best way to move forward with the phase 4 implementation plan and how much time would be needed for that. And phase 4 is really when in the process you do design of a remedy and begin to actually put it fully in place to deal with the source. You've dealt with the immediate risks that have been since 2020 through bottled water, the water system, as this discussion illustrates, this is now where you deal with those issues. This is an unusually complex site, given the ongoing operations, given the offsite reach of it, and the fact that the chemical you're dealing with is new in the grand scheme of things. It's been a couple of years now, and there's more attention to it. But it does take a little bit longer than usual to to finish up a remedy. It's not as simple as getting soil out. For those reasons, we had talked to DEP about making sure that the deadlines that would normally apply under the Massachusetts contingency plan, the regs that govern cleanups, are appropriate. They have expressed a willingness to extend some of those deadlines. A mechanism for doing that is for the airport to seek a request for an extension, and usually there is what's referred to as a consent order, not in the sense that there's a violation, but in the sense that there is an extension. That's the mechanism they have to extend these out, these deadlines out, in order to be able to give you time to do that. So I believe you have seen a copy of Warren, correct me if I'm wrong, of a proposed letter that would go out with an explanation of what would happen next under the plan, or under the cleanup. And the ask here would be to give, the expectation is that there would be remedy implementation beginning in 2027. So the next year and a half or so, we finish planning with soil and groundwater remedies completed by the end of 2028. So the ask is to submit the phase 4 plan by June 30th, 2027 or sooner. And the phase 4 completion statement, that's sort of where we have done the work, by June 30th, 2028. That's the ask for DEP. They usually would respond with essentially an agreement saying, yes, that's what the deadlines are, and here's what happens if you don't meet them. And so that's something that we would expect. We've looked at the form of agreement they use as generally the form we would expect. And that is, the approach that I think the LSP, Jim Sukup, and we would recommend moving forward.
Thank you. Agreed, Mr. Chair. I actually haven't submitted that letter to the commission yet, just because I was waiting on some verbiage from Jim Sokup, our LSP, to update that. I'll be meeting with him tomorrow once I get that off.
My apologies, Warren. I didn't mean to get ahead of you there.
Okay.
No,
I think the key point is the letter describes, what the work will consist of at a high level. Obviously, that's why we need the implementation plan itself. And those two dates are the key dates being asked for. June 30th, 2027 for the phase 4 plan, and 2028 for the actual remedy completion statement.
are there any concerns with that approach? That's suggested by council and
We discussed the consent last month, and we agreed to go with that.
Yeah, I think that, I don't think we need any action on that. I believe that update. Since there's not any concerns out there, is how we will proceed. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Are there any questions? Some further discussion on the PFAS activities. Okay, that we will move on to the crew quarters project.
Yeah, so with the crew quarters project, we were able to receive the temporary certificate of occupancy. I think we are still waiting for a couple of final as-builts. But I do believe in our last month's meeting, there was a lot of questions and concerns about the most recent change order. So I wanted to bring in both our OPM as well as our architect to be able to discuss those and to give you a better understanding of why, and any questions you would have for them. So at this time, I'll turn it over. I think I saw Sean online.
Yes.
As well as, I'm online. We have Ethan, our architect, who's in person here as well. Thanks.
Mr. Cormier?
Hi, Sean Cormier with CHA Consulting, OPM. We have 4 PCOs to be discussed. First one has to do with adding steel column or a revision to the steel columns in the basement. This is a PCO for $31,000, $31,737.29. This revision Ethan can walk us through. Warren, did you present the summary I already gave you on this?
I did, I
Okay.
sent it to the chair, yeah.
So we'll reinforce this through Ethan's comments too, because that was from the contractor. So I'll turn it over to Ethan for that first discussion.
Yeah, sure. Join us, absolutely. Maybe pull up a chair there in the end, maybe we. The bag or. That way the camera can capture you. Thanks for coming in.
Sure, pleasure. Ethan Griffin, Griffin Architects. So the steel column revisions was related to how the modular boxes are going to be supported, you know, at the sort of subgrade level. I think the original design intent was for them to sort of span about 24 feet and have a single beam that was going to run across to support them. I think ultimately when it got to SBS, their sort of max span was 20 feet for how they sort of like do things with their standard rim joist. The sort of simplest solution at the time seemed to be to add some columns in existing walls, so preserving kind of the clear span quality of the basement, but put some columns in the existing partitions. So that's, I think, the genesis of that particular issue. Any further questions?
So I guess. What I sort of am concerned with is this is from September of last year. And a $32,000 change. Was made, I don't believe, was that in, brought forward. That's the concern, if the money's already spent.
Sure. Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think it's fair to say that, all of these items were probably things that, the project could have stopped and we could have, worked through the various proposals. I do think, a lot of this is related to just kind of moving the project forward as expeditiously as possible. I think on the whole team's end, we were trying to, there was a goal to do that. That's a fair question. I mean, I don't think I have a better answer for you other than, the alternative would have been just to sort of put everything on hold, reassess, and move forward.
And through our owner's project manager, I guess that is almost a bigger concern to me. Did you authorize this?
So unfortunately, I wasn't the OPM at the time. However, looking back at the PCO, looks like there was one cost that came in late that held this up, and that had to do with the excavation contractor. All the other prices came in back in October and November. I'm not unsure why Pearl decided to withhold this PCO and submit so late in the game. Looks like it went into September for consideration.
Well, I mean, in fairness, that seems to be on Pearl or Case. I don't see why. That then comes or CHA rather, as our own project manager, if there was going to be a change and it was going to hold up stuff. That in July. We're asked to pay for money that was spent in September without any notification.
I mean, all I know is that this was on the PCO log. This was forecasted as a change. The resolution of the cost didn't come in until looks like September. So I mean, the information was out there and was forecasted as a change order, or it was known that there was a cost change here for this work.
So as our own project manager, why wasn't, and whether that was you, it's still your company, why didn't we know that?
I can't answer that.
Yeah. Next one.
I want to add to that is like, who's responsible for designing doing the original design in which the original design doesn't work, and who made that design, and how does that, who was responsible for that? I mean, we have a fixed cost project here, and now it was pretty expensive as it is, and now we're asking for overrides because somebody didn't look at the plan from the beginning to design it properly. Who did that work? The led to this is.
Was there a structural?
Yeah, there's a structural plan with the original column layout with the steel. To be honest, there was some discussion about this before we were on board. I think a lot of this happened like around September. I don't think we were officially on board again until mid-October at this point. But there was a design that went out that, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you like it was gonna fall down if they didn't do it this way. It seems looking back through this, it was a recommendation by the modular company. This is not how we typically do stuff. This is how we'd rather do it. It's-
Whose stamp was on the plans?
the bid drawings, my stamp.
So would you plan work?
Absolutely, the structural plan and the design plan, yeah.
So then why did it change? Spend $30,000.
It's a fair question, and I don't know, like I see in this, there's two deductions. For the steel foundation allowance and the structural steel. A steel beam was eliminated, this W12 by 26 continuous steel beam. Is there a savings there that needs to be more, accurately reflected? I think that's also a fair question.
Yeah, it's still, whoever made that change is the one responsible for it without. If you didn't authorize it, or think you did, I'm just saying, like, you designed it so it would work. And they said, hey, we don't know how to do this like this, doesn't mean you can't do it that way,
Sure, that's
right? So
fair.
that's how we want it done, so put it in the way we want it done. They didn't say it wouldn't work. It's not the way we normally do it.
Correct.
So. Somebody's made all these decisions and now we're supposed to pay for them, and it's not how we bid or approved the job to do it. We've got no prior approval, so. That's how I feel about it.
And as an owner project manager. That I think is paid to bring those things to us, and that's where I see my concern. Was that if CHA didn't bring that to the commission for authorization as owner project manager. Then did you authorize it with an expectation? Who made that authorization, I think, and so we've asked for more information, but it hasn't been sort of forthcoming. I don't know if you have any paper trail that you can dig up on that, Mr. Cormier.
I will look in our records, see if there's anything else additional.
Okay, thanks. And what's the next one?
The next one is for added height to retaining wall. This is $11,817.79. This had to do with adjustments to the retaining wall due to a constructability issue with the back door of the apartment. And Ethan, I think you can elaborate on that.
Sure. So this is related to a condition where we had a pretty steep sort of angle of repose of the soil going down from the rear slab to the retaining wall. Ultimately, again, I stand by the design. I think it would have worked. Would it have been great long-term maintenance wise? Probably not. I think some mitigation was required. We did look at two options. One would be just pouring a stem wall essentially to support that corner of the slab. And then the other was ultimately what was proceeded with, which was adding height to the retaining. So that's a two-factor thing because that also impacted the split rail fence, just I think what ultimately transpired was the fact that the adding to the retaining wall utilized a block that was already on site and with a contractor that was already on site versus bringing back the concrete contractor and the excavator to do the work required to add the stem wall, right? The foundation wall to support the stem. Similar again, similar issue on the last one, whether, we should have brought you guys or somebody else and it's work that was completed.
Right, so it's sort of an authorization and question that, again, I wonder who told the contractor back, and this was like when also October?
No, this would have been this spring, I think.
Yeah, it looks like April was when we got the quote from CC Construction.
So you received a quote as our own project manager and then authorized that work?
again, I wasn't the owner, project manager at the time. I would have to go back and see where the authorization came from.
All right, we'll stand by. Next.
Okay, so this one, it's a little bit over my head, but I'm gonna give you kind of my summary. So there was a question about the capacity of the lines, the electrical lines coming from the transformer to the building and to the panel. And the level of sort of compatibility of them. The electrical inspector had some concerns, I guess, that the solution that we had proposed and got permitted wasn't to his liking. So our mechanical electrical engineer contractor consultant worked with George to come up with a solution that resulted in this 600 amp disconnect. Again, there was full transparency. There was an alternative to this, was to bring in, I think it was an 800 amp service for the panel, which had other, I guess they ran it up and there were other cost implications for that. I think it was the wire itself with the 800 was about 40,000 for the wire. So ultimately, this was something that made the inspector happy and allowed the project to move forward.
And what was the cost on this one?
21,000. 21,000.
$21,000 for 600.
$21,087.99.
For 600 distance.
Correct.
And same thing, Mr. Cormier, you have to get us more information on that, or do you have information where you?
Same thing. Wasn't the OPM at the time.
But your company should have all these records, I presume.
Hope so.
Anything else?
I know this was a decision to move the project along us. We would not have achieved C of O by 8-1.
Do we have a CFO of 8-1?
We have a TCO.
No, not a TCO, a CO.
We do not have a CO. We have a TCO.
Why is that? Well, we'll get into that next. What's the next one?
The last one is a split rail fence related to the adding the height to the retaining wall. We didn't anticipate necessarily that the wall was going to go the full length. We did anticipate there was going to be some amount of split rail that required a couple lanes. But either way, this does sort of enclose that whole sunken well with the split rail fence. I think they wound up adding block to the sort of the entire top course.
And how much is that one?
$3,455.76.
Well, would there not been a
Safety rail.
safety rail?
So as designed, they were every tier was under 30 inches.
So because the top one, it's easier for them to-
Correct. That's correct.
That I could see more, of, but I still think that it's probably something that should have probably come to us, and if it had been in sort of all of it in aggregate, but, that one, I don't, 3,000, the other one's at, 21, 12, 32 for those changes to be made and authorized outside of it's public money. That's the concern I think that we have. So it sounds like, Mr. Cormier, you're gonna get us some more information.
Now, see what I can find.
Okay.
Right, again, I'd like to
Yeah, there's some more.
digress a little bit,
Yeah.
just back to the electrical piece. I don't understand how you go from needing a 800 amp service to being okay with a 600 amp service if you put a distance in. There's something about that that doesn't sit well with me.
Okay.
I know a little bit about electricity.
Sure.
And that's like, it's either 600 amps is good, or it isn't good.
Okay.
So I don't understand why the
So,
distance all of a sudden makes.
Ethan, correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't this redesigned or came up because of potential for phase 2? If we put it in as per designed, it would have only achieved the requirements of phase 1 and not been sufficient for phase 2.
That's a good. It is related somewhat to future build out of the basin. And before I get too far down the line, I don't want to say anything that's incorrect, because it's not my area of expertise. But there was Yes, it is related to what the capability of the panel versus the power coming in from the two water streams. And I can get some more clarity from our consultant. Yeah, sure.
Okay, yeah, whatever clarity you can get on that and provide it to Mr. Warren, please, to Mr. Smith, please. And then he can distribute it to the commission. Yeah, we're just trying to have an understanding. I hope you understand that we, as gatekeepers, sort of a public money, public project is where, you know, this is our responsibility. And ultimately, we do appreciate your efforts on the project. And then, so those are the change orders, that we'll get more information on, and then we can have further discussion. On the overall project, is there anything further that either of you would like to bring to our attention or bring up?
I don't have anything further at this point, but we'll have more information.
I don't have anything further as far as change orders go or anything like that. I mean, all I know at this point is there's about, I think, 3 items left on the punch list and a site as-built left to resubmit. That's a missing information. And as far as I know, that's what's holding up our final affidavits for the final C of O.
And what are the items on the punch list?
One of them is for arc welding, arc fault stickers on certain electrical equipment. The EV charging station equipment is been back ordered, so we're waiting for that arrival. And then due to the watering restrictions, I believe that the I can't think of the word. The grass that was sprayed, the hydro seed, was it didn't take due to insufficient watering. So it's going to be resprayed in the cooler months, like October or September.
Well,
And just to elaborate on that, it's the stickers that are the final aspect for the electrical affidavit to be done from a CO. So that's the last one. We are awaiting a sewer connection as built from Bracken, how the new lines tie into the system dorm. But I'm sure about correct me if I'm wrong on this one. I don't know that that's tied to the specific CO for the building, whether that's something you want to, you know, hold the contractor responsible for. That's a separate issue.
well, ultimately, I think that is Mr. Murphy's decision. If he's gonna require that sign off from the sewer department prior to issuing a final CO. But I think that we certainly need that prior to final requisition. I had a question, and I've been asking to see these as-built for, I want to say, months at this point. You know, that sewer connection happened quite a long time ago. And so, you know, for that to be cause of after the final date, that's concerning. And what I was curious of is, because I saw one of the photos, the ejector pump in the basement, which I know that we wanted to have installed for future basement development. But in fact, and you probably answer this, I wanted to answer the question myself through seeing the as-built, but does the building flow gravity and then only the pump comes up, or is all the building flows go through the pump?
The only thing that goes to the pump right now is condensate.
Okay.
And so there is, and then I think Mr. Lassen can probably elaborate on this, but if actual effluent is going to go through the ejector pump, it either needs a retention chamber outside the building that's sized to hold it in case there's a power outage, or a generator that's running.
Right, okay, I just wanted to, based on that, I just wanted to check that, though I still don't. It's still somewhat concerning that, you know, given the timeline and the dates, and that we had a project completion deadline that we're a couple of weeks past. So what is your projected time at this point for a CO? I mean, you say stickers, and what am I missing?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we have an example of what the stickers are that are required. It's essentially their warning stickers that says that the cabinets, you know, you've got a certain criteria, and this is what the cabinets got on it. That I think this came to light that this was really a serious issue that was missing about 2.5 weeks ago. So I think the onus has been on Pearl to work with Nantucket Electric to get those stickers on there. I'm not quite sure why we're at this point. The as-built for the sewer, I'm just sort of getting up to speed on this. I talked to Bracken Engineering, Earl Chartiers, and Jason Calvert are the main guys that are working on it. I guess one of the site contractors had covered some things. I didn't do their inspection, so I think they're working with them to just get photos or whatever they need to verify was there. We were hoping to have it last Wednesday, but I guess Earl got back from vacation and brought us up to speed as to why it's delayed.
And then the seed, I gotta push back a little on the water restrictions because those didn't start till quite some time after that seed was sprayed. And there was no watering happening. Like that seed, you can get us maybe you get us a copy of that invoice from which contractor sprayed the hydro seed, and we'll have that date, and we know the date of the implementation. But
Also, isn't it automatic, the water sprinklers that are restricted, not the hand watering?
no, if it was drip irrigation, then it's not restricted, but spray, you know, if you would need sprinklers to cover that area. And you still could be allowed to water during certain days. So it's not like there was, you know, no watering. I don't believe that, you know, I think that was on the contractor. So again, I think back to you, Mr. Cormier, what I'm wondering is, as our own project manager, why there wasn't that level of oversight the day that seed went down to make sure it was getting water.
Good question.
Were you on the job at that point?
I was part of the job, but I wasn't the project manager at the time.
So you've been our project manager since,
Ted Gentry, Ted Caswell, their departures.
which was,
I don't know the date, sir, off the top of my head.
Beginning of May, I would say.
thank you.
I can have a look.
Yeah, and again, I think I'm just getting at, you know, there's a level of service that I think the airport commission's paying an awfully, you know, premium for an owner's project manager to.
Yeah, we didn't have an on-site rep. You know, that was not part of the agreement. So there wasn't somebody at the site monitoring that at all times.
Still responsible for contract conditions and says on the plan, the contractor's supposed to do it. You don't have to be on
Which
site.
we've followed up with the contractor many times on. So not pointing fingers, but contractor didn't water enough and the grass didn't take.
All right, well, obviously you're aware that that needs to be, you know, fixed. I just don't want to see
Yes.
it. That you're
There'll
putting
be
up because of a water restriction that wasn't in place at the time. That's fair. So. Okay. So anticipated time to a final CO?
I'm gonna find out when the arc fault stickers are coming. That was the last thing, which I don't have definitive answer on that from Chase at Pearl.
Okay. Please keep Mr. Smith posted and keep the commission posted. Does anybody else have questions related to the project?
I have a whole bunch. I'm kind of coming to this party late, so apologies if these have been discussed before. Did we have a fixed price contract to do this job?
For construction contracts, it's a little bit different. It's a lump sum and it's getting amended by the change orders.
Okay, and do we have a consolidated list of all of the change orders and what the
Yes.
total cost of them are?
Yes,
Could you circulate a copy of that?
of course.
Mr. Cormier, I've heard you a couple of times sort of disclaim responsibility for what's going on. I'm just wondering, are you representing yourself personally, or are you representing a firm that we have a contract with?
I'm at CHA Consulting.
And so is the contract with the airport with CHS Consulting.
Yes.
So it would seem to me that each of your responses to "it wasn't my fault, I wasn't here" really isn't appropriate, because I believe tonight you're representing your firm, not yourself personally. Is that correct?
You are correct, sir.
Okay. So we're gonna get a full list of what this has cost us through all of the change orders, because things may or may not have been either designed properly or managed properly. Do we have a copy with the contracts on file here of the E&O policies, both the architect and the OPM?
We do,
Okay. Could we get those circulated, please?
yes.
And did the contract have a delivery date for the CO?
I'm not sure about that. I have to have a look.
And
Mr. Cormier, as our on project manager, what's that delivery date?
I'm looking it up now.
We'll give him the time to do that and keep going.
okay, and I think my last question is, does the contract have penalties for delays beyond the delivery date?
I'm sure we do. Again, I have to have a look on the terms, the
Okay,
contract.
and that'd be great if you
More
could
closely.
circulate that with
Yep.
us and maybe start to do some
Mhm.
calculations as to what we'd be given really on now, we passed the delivery date.
Will do.
Okay.
Contract says June 30th was the contract expiration date. June 30, 2025.
Which was about 6 weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
And while you have that up in front of you, the penalty clauses?
Says the airport may retain a sum of $1,000 for each calendar day, Sundays and holidays included, that the work remains incomplete beyond the time of completion as determined by the airport in reasonable judgment.
Thank you. Okay. Well, let's hope we can get it done. Shoot. Anybody else have anything further? Thank you both for coming and just to be willing, we just read this.
No, I appreciate your questions.
Okay, all right,
Got
thank
you
you.
some more answers.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? With that, we will move on to the terminal optimization project.
Yeah, so with the terminal optimization project, as you're aware, we've been kind of discussing what we could do to better utilize the space in the terminal. The intent is to wait for a notice of a funding opportunity for the last ATB grant funding opportunity that's told by our lobbyists, AAAE, that they should have hit the streets either July or August, and here we are mid-August. We haven't seen it quite yet, so we're pulling out to see if it's gonna actually hit the streets. But if it does, we definitely would like to pursue that funding opportunity to repurpose the terminal space, hopefully expand the hold room area, try to minimize as much of the tent on the ramp as possible, and to try to move some kiosks around, eliminate some kiosks the airlines use, repurpose that space better, and just make it more affordable, more amendable for our patrons that use our terminal. So really, we're just kind of waiting to see when this NOFO, as they call it, hits the streets. Of course, AAAE did cancel our meeting on Monday with any updates, as it is recessed with Congress right now. So hopefully in the next week or two, we'll see it on the streets, and then we'll go after that grant and see what opportunities we have. And then, of course, as Mr. Lassen had mentioned earlier, the discussion not only with the geothermal wells, but it would be also to discuss if the NOFO doesn't happen, how do we pursue looking at opportunities to still repurpose the space and do the terminal optimization? So more to come there. So that's all I have with that.
Any questions, terminal optimization? Mr. Lasden, you have anything you want to add? You don't have to.
No, I just, as the airport manager said, we're waiting on your behalf for the NOFO to come to the streets, and then we will complete that on your behalf, obviously with your input in the document.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Mr. Chair, one more. We do have kind of initial drawings of what it could look like if that NOFO does come about. I'd like to present that in the next commission meeting.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
We'll keep that on the agenda.
Absolutely.
And high mass lighting.
IMAS lighting, we received a grant and are looked to submit it to the FAA prior to the end of this week. With possible construction this coming fall and spring to replace 20 high mast lights. And for your records, Mr. Levitt, the lights, they're gonna be lowered. There's 20 lights, they're gonna be lowered to 30 feet and tilted, of course, to provide the best luminosity there on the ramp spaces. They will have turn on, turn off capability with a set timer, to comply with the dark sky initiatives that we have with the town and of course with consistent products of
The existing lights are 40, you'll get a 10-foot reduction, that's helpful, yeah. With shielding, I think it was the other piece, we're trying to do
If I may,
yeah.
Mr. Chair, just for the commission's understanding, that grant has to be signed by this Thursday.
I'm gonna get into that on the commissioner's comments as well, thank you. Well, I guess on that particular grant under this item, the intent is that we have been waiting to working with council to be able to, there's been new language in some of the grant assurances to issue. We're in compliance, and so intent would be following this meeting and notification of the commission that I intend to sign both the IVAS lighting grant as well as the reimbursement for the Sentinel Line project. So just wanted to let you all know that you can proceed with that. Just the introduction concerns, but let's be about the council. Thank you, Mr. Laz. And there's any other questions on the project? And that's essentially replacing. I mean, I think it's already a great, community and airport project. Those lights were 17 years ago, so 15, 17, something like that, years old, if I remember.
Oh, the lights?
Yeah,
Yeah, they're at least that old.
yeah. So, that's good. Bring them up. Okay, then let's go on to capital fees.
Yeah. So updates for FY27 capital projects. There really isn't any updates to the total amount that we had presented to the commission last month. Airport management did meet with the town manager and CFO to provide just some more context on the capital project for their knowledge, just for the FYI meeting. And we are looking at an October 9th placeholder for the airport CapCom presentation for the FY27 articles. For that.
Hold on a second, yeah, please on that. Were there any questions or further discussion on the capital projects?
In the package, there was a page listing the capital projects. And it looks like for fiscal 27, the total $1,000,004. That seems rather light considering what we've been spending historically in the amount of cash the operations are throwing off. Is there other capital spending that's going to be spent in 27, or is only going to be more than 4? I'm talking about the airports, not all of them.
Mr. Levitt, if I may.
Yes.
There are a lot of the project, we still have big projects coming up, like the High Mass project or the Sound Wall or some other smaller projects that they already approved by Capcom and town meeting. So that's why they're not on the list. This is what we're going to be submitting and presenting in front of Capcom for fiscal 2027, but we still have the authorization and appropriation already for different projects that they are still ongoing or going to be starting next year or the year after that. Because we also follow up our CIP list that we work with MJ and FAA and MassDOT to update every year.
So is there something in one of these documents that would show the total amount spending on capital in 27?
Yes, and even one of the spreadsheets that I believe Warren sent you over, and I can resend definitely, it can show you absolutely everything. Well, that's our CIP FAA list that I was talking about. There is one personal spreadsheet of mine with all the capital projects and every single one of them, how much money we have spent for them. If you want to see it particularly per year, I can break it down and send it that way, but this one will be the best to show you.
Okay, maybe you could walk through it.
Yes,
So that it's-
definitely. Yeah, we did not get to this one when we met. So
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you. And I think that really just to recap that piece, and this is information that would be helpful to have, is essentially making sure we don't overspend because of the prior commitments that have been made, but that's not clear from the information that we have. And I think that one of my sense is that we also this year, because we haven't included housing, while we still have it as an initiative, we need to work on that. I mean, ideally, should there be a placeholder on that for housing? And that has run us up against the wall the last couple of years at Capcom, because we put it in on that basis as a placeholder. We say, oh, let's have X million dollars to continue, once we finish this dorm project. Capcom on the other side of that has said, you guys are telling us it's gonna cost this much money, but you don't have any actual plans. These projections that you have is way too expensive, and it's been a bit of a chicken and an egg, and as we've tried to do that. My hope is that we could get better developed plans and better estimating to be able to then have for housing, if that's what we're gonna do, to have a more solid approach with Capcom. And I just don't think that with the dorm project and everything else and the manager change, we were able to get that pulled together to be on this year's CIP list. So I think that money still hopefully in retained earnings, if we don't spend it, can be essentially savings for when we do get to whatever, the housing problems. So I think that's why it's low. And it is low. The last couple of years, I want to say it was more like 4, 8, 5, 6.
Yeah, definitely.
Because we had put in a townhouse fund that we don't have this year, but we still have to pursue, our airport staff housing and whatever it is that I think the commission needs to probably get on to further discussions, whether that's agenda item, which direction and how we're going to proceed on that basis. So we also, need to finish up the project we're on. It's a bandwidth procedure to that's fair. That helps. Anything further on the capital projects? I don't think we need an actual motion on that, so thank you for the good work. Keeping us up to speed on that, and the fourth quarter report.
Yeah, so I'd like to present the fourth quarter, the Port Enterprise Fund quarterly financial report for the fourth quarter, fiscal quarter, also the end of the fiscal year. I'll just go through the highlights briefly. We have pulled up to for airport revenues. So total airport revenue collected in FY25 was $30,206,530, which represented an increase of $2,767,993 compared to the previous fiscal year's total of $27,438,537. Primary driver of this year-over-year growth was fuel sales revenue. The total fuel sales revolver and operating rose by 1.8 million over the last year, estimate. And then the fuel revolver had a spending limit of 8.5 million for FY25. Fee income and rental income were up $96,841 and $194,910 respectively. Interest on investments grew by $431,706 compared to FY24. Vehicle revenue, which included parking lot fees, parking tickets, and taxi permits, increased as well by $124,000 respectively. The only category that declined was other revenue, which decreased by $32,000. This is primarily due to the suspension of the federal LEO reimbursement program, which remains unfunded. And as a result, we weren't able to submit for reimbursement during the past fiscal year. But overall, total revenue, including other financial sources, reached 119% of the annual budgeted amount for the 12-month reporting period. A strong performance, of course, that reflects growth across key categories. For airport expenses, operating expenses, and excluding debt service total roughly $20.7 million for FY25, an increase of $3 million compared to FY24. The primary driver of this increase was the acquisition of employee housing. Salaries and Medicare expenses, of course, increased by $562,000 and $8,000, roughly $8,000 respectively, largely due to the departure of several long-tenured employees and cost of living adjustments. Administrative expenses, which included utilities, credit card fees, increased by $202,454 compared to the prior year. And fixed-based operation expenses decreased by $310,000 due to private catering and a shift in the way we operate at the primary catering vendor. Services and maintenance were up $135,099. The increase is driven by investment in the repairs of the fuel farm, and general insurance expenses also increased by roughly $82,000. Debt service interest increased by $324,116 due to the short-term bond anticipation note for the South Apron project that we just paid off. This rise reflects both higher interest rates and the scale of the project. So overall operating expenses, including debt service finished the 12-month period up 55% compared to last year and matched to 88% of the annual budget allocation.
Yes. I guess one thing that pops out at me is you indicated that the airport operating expenses increased by 3 million, and most of that was the acquisition of employee housing. I'd be used to seeing acquisition of housing as a capital expenditure, not really an operating expense. And if you're comparing year-to-year increases, that would tend to skew it unfairly. So how much of that 3 million increase was the acquisition of employee housing?
The employee housing that we purchased, and the way why it was paid out of the operating budget, is because we didn't have, a capital article from prior year approved. We also never submitted it through Capcom, but we really needed the housing to house our new airport manager, whoever that might be. So the commission and the manager at the time, they discussed, also together with finance, and they showed us that this would be the way to do it. We did a budget transfer for the same fiscal year at annual town meeting of $2.8 million from retained earnings into our operating side of the budget. And we purchased the house on Goldfinch for $2.3 million. So if we take that out of the equation, the budget was $700,000 more than the prior year.
So I mean, it seems like there's a little bit of a budget game going on of moving monies between operating and capital. But if you're trying to assess your operating expenses and compare apples to apples, you really do need to back out that 2.3 expense.
The thing is,
Correct, if you're comparing 2 years.
I totally understand what you're saying, but just the way how we do it and how the transfer was on the general ledger and the books and everything, the money actually went technically to our operating budget, and we paid out of an expense account out of our operating budget. So we wanted to be consistent and just leave it that way. And I thought that maybe that note mentioning it was helpful, but I guess maybe and hopefully we don't have purchases of real estate from the operating budget in the future. But I'll think about doing it in a different way and presenting in a different way then.
It's probably, yes, it's probably just the presentation. Because unfortunately, that's the way it came out of the book, so you can't change that, but the presentation.
Yeah, literally, if you don't want.
Explain it.
Yeah.
Easier, maybe
One more sentence.
Yeah.
On there to say that of that 3 million, the 3.3.
Yeah, the 3.3
Was
was,
a one-time, based upon transfers and not the way that I think we normally would look to do this, though, so it's clear, that did go through, it was brought to the finance committee and to town meeting. Like this was the transfer that was gonna be made for that purpose of town meeting.
Right, but it's
I
essentially.
agree with you, but we all do, it doesn't, it's gonna skew things next year when all of a sudden you're down. When you say, oh, you're down your operating budget because you've had this as a benchmark, but how do you? I don't know how to change, how to.
so how we did it, that $2.8 million that they transfer into our operating budget, just next year when I compare budget to budget, I won't include that budget transfer, because what we technically did is we had one budget approved at last year's town meeting, and then we just increased it with that same budget. We increased it with that $2.8 million. So when I compare the budgets in our quarterly reports next year, I won't include that increase of $2.8 million.
Well, I understand where on the pro formas it may need to be there, but in your MD&A, you could essentially say that exclusive of the 2.3 million operating expenses, We're up 700,000.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you could do it that way too.
Thank you. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else? No. So, that we will move on to the tenant alteration application for airport gas.
We have one tenant alteration application for airport gas. Kind of give you an idea of what it is. It is to remove, so basically airport gas, I think they're upgrading their tanks that they've had for a long time. They've reached their lifespan, their value. And so they presented this to the select board to get the proper permitting that got approved. But the tenant alteration asked for the removal of the 500 gallons heating oil UST from the south side of the property. Also to remove and replace 2 underground storage tanks and upgrade the fire suppression system to include 2 emergency shutdown switches to comply with fire department requirements. As part of the DEP regulations, any major site improvements will require them to upgrade all fueling components to meet current standards. This includes upgrading all fuel flex piping lines and installing modern dispenser sumps. Again, I don't have any issue with the 2A. Do I have to ask for your approval of that, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, I believe so.
So, yeah.
I believe with the commission. I don't have a problem with it. I appreciate their, gonna serve, the community with the fuel and what have you. I'm just curious where it just doesn't seem they're, they're showing these existing tanks on their plan. But then when I look at the summary that, Ms. Mooney, provided for the select board, it just doesn't seem to quite make sense in terms of what's listed as existing bulk storage tanks and the proposed. And so they're increasing gasoline by 7,000 gallons and increasing super by 6 and diesel by 1,000. And the plan doesn't show the tanks being removed, and then it says existing. Has this work already happened?
As far as I know, no, we haven't had anybody over there.
So I wonder why the plan shows, it said, existing and proposed.
Yeah, they're in the same place. They're gonna go, they dig the old ones out, put the new ones in.
I see, and this is but they're just not labeling the volume of the existing. Okay.
Yeah.
And they're not showing the tanks being removed, but I'm not concerned with it. I was just trying to mostly understand, and for the record, and for the public, be clear of the magnitude of what's being, what's being proposed here. So, anybody else have any questions on it? Is there a motion to approve the tenant alteration application?
So moved.
Second. Explains how you vote.
Aye.
Ms. Box.
Aye.
Mr. Stein.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, that's aye. Thank you. And that brings us on to the management report.
Yeah, we can check. So project updates on the AIP side, for the master plan. The final public open house has been rescheduled for Thursday, September 11th. At 5 p.m. to accommodate the select board meeting that had actually been scheduled on the 10th. There also is another commitment that has come to our attention that will be happening in the terminal with some filming that will also have created a conflict that night. So it's best for us to move it to September 11th so that we have utilized and maximize the more space we in our terminal. So the open house will allow the general public to gather insight into the upcoming 30 to 40 years for the airport has planned, and to ask any questions, of course, for the airport management commissioners and our airport consultants. Continued environmental monitoring. Our conservation and management permit requires the airport to convene a technical advisory committee meeting, or a TAPMIC meeting, as we call it, annually to evaluate and refine any management activities. This is spearheaded by our licensed and hired botanist, who's with VHB. And that meeting has been planned for the end of October with the required stakeholders from Mass DEP, Natural Heritage, the airport's consulting firm, FAA, and Mass DOT in attendance. The airport plans to present any management schedule updates from this TAP meeting and next November airport commission meeting during my comments. So more to come there.
If I may on that, I've historically attended that as well. So that's what I'll report on. Really good. On the non-AIP side, already touched based on the sound barrier noise wall. Of course, the kickoff meeting is coming this Thursday with Premier Fence, MJ, Farm Johnson, management. So that's getting underway.
RFPs that we have, as Ms. Collins had mentioned in her PFAS report, we're doing an ARF transition RFP. It closed last week on the 6th. We are currently reviewing those two proposals. And to provide context for you, Mr. Levitt, the airport is transitioning two of its ARF fire trucks to fluorine-free foam that is more environmentally and chemically safe. And basically what they're going to do is remove the current F3 foam in there, clean out the tanks, and then put in the new fluorine-free safe foam. We just procured a new fire truck that went into commission about 2 months ago. That already came with the new foam, and so we have to transition the other two trucks. And so that's what this RFP is for. The other RFP that we have that we're working on right now is an aircraft boarding ramp. The scope of work has been written. It's currently in my hands for review, with hopes to putting that on the street in the next week or two. And airport management, both me and Preston, we were actually approached by Nantucket the Nantucket Fire Department chief a couple weeks ago, in relation to them receiving multiple calls to help assist passengers with severe disabilities off the aircraft, and of course in emergent situations. And it has posed a challenge for them with those narrow stairs that these aircraft have to get the passenger from an aisle chair down these steps and basically onto the wheelchair that's out of the aircraft. And with those challenges, not only with NFD, but it's also with our staff, as they are also required to assist in that. So having a boarding ramp that can come right up to the aircraft's door would provide more useful, so that they don't have to physically carry the person down these narrow steps, potentially slip. And then now you got not just one person who's hurt, you got both people hurt. So that's what we're looking to do, is to get a new boarding ramp that would, you know, be safer for all parties.
It's like a scissor lift kind of.
It's a straight ramp,
Yes.
basically, that is,
So no switchbacks.
no switchback. It's much lower, it doesn't go as high as a switchback. It would be rolled up to an aircraft and to have the ability to use a wheelchair to take people up and down.
Story.
Well, that's the scope of work is it's, you know, we're looking for an aluminum.
Break it down, put it together, kind of thing, like.
No, just, I mean, aluminum, just so it can
Stand.
so it can withstand the salt air and whatnot. So that is definitely a concern, and that's, you know, I don't know where our GSC storage garage is on our CIP, but it's in the next couple of years. But this has been it's been an ongoing issue over the last couple of years, where we've been getting these phone calls from these aircraft operators, and our guys aren't trained, our firefighters at the airport aren't trained on stair chair operations. So trying to lift individuals out of airplanes is a huge risk. We would do it if there was an actual emergency, but if this is just in and out due to them arriving and departing, we can assist best we can with, you know, small step stools and giving hands or assisting, you know, the individuals or family members.
It's fine. The only thing that comes to my mind is going to work with our configured ramp parking. I don't get it probably into the weeds here with the longer ramp, and
We can always tow them or park them where it is.
Thank
You
you
can
for
utilize that.
to work on that. I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. Absolutely.
Okay. All right, moving on with the operations update. Of course, with the ramp management plan, we have 2 new GPUs that we were just approved earlier in the meeting. Of course, to limit APU usage and APU runtime. There's still some more work that needs to be updated to the ramp management plan. My time got sidetracked with other events that we'll talk about here, so I still need to update that for management. But some more to come there. With airline service, there's been minimal delays recently. But however, during times of delays, the airlines have been pretty slow to provide us with details. Whenever there's maintenance, or if they need to throw an aircraft that's going to be on delay over to get spot 7, called spot 7, gate 7, whatever we call it. So we've asked for the airlines to be better communicating with us, to let us know of these delays. They need to shift the aircraft over, just so that we can also accommodate our staff and know, you know, to be a presence in the terminal. As you know, the terminal, the Holden's going to fill up if there's delays and cancellations, and want to make sure that we're prepared. And of course, due to the security door issues that we had from 2 weeks ago, there were a couple of delays that were brought to our attention from American Airlines. So because of this, I had airport security manually control and man those doors to allow the passengers in and out, so that we didn't take any more delays, that were within our, our control. But hats off to security for doing what they did. They did a phenomenal job, and being there, working a little overtime, but just to ensure the best possible outcomes to minimize those delays. So thank you for that. I did meet with all the airline partners 3 weeks ago, finally a first good formal introduction with them. The only one was Cape Air. I'm actually meeting with Chuck Ferreira, who's the head honcho over there at Cape Air next week. As he wasn't able to attend that meeting due to personal family issues. So more to come there, but definitely want to just sit down with him as he's our signatory airline. Just get control and things like that. The baggage belt system. So last week, the CT scanner did go down, which caused delays for the airlines. And for some context, the CT scanner is actually TSA owned and operated. It's their equipment. So moving forward, I have asked the TSA to be transparent whenever it does go down. Let our security staff know, let us know. That way, if there are delays that come about, we want to make sure we minimize those, because it can affect the airlines if, bags are not fully been screened and getting those out to the aircraft. So this is not the first time that's happened. It has happened, I think, another time this summer. And of course, it just emphasizes the need for the airport terminal optimization plan to see if there's potential to secure a secondary CT scanner. If this one goes down, you've got the other one still functioning. We don't have any training updates to provide at this time. The big one is we had a vice presidential visit 2 weeks ago. The VP did come and the visit was a success operationally here at the airport. All staff performed well and are to be commended for the tasks and needs that were asked of them. These IROPs are unique. They require a lot of out of the norm requests that put more work into their laps, particularly coming from the Secret Service. So it is to be commended also for Nantucket Airport that we can handle such a request and get dedicated staff to work around the clock. So thank you all for your hard work with that. It went very well, went very smoothly. Fuel sales, we continue to break records with the amount of volume that we continue to have. The airport did put in place some fuel uplift limits last month for over 1 weekend due to heavy demand. And due to limited reservations this week, we are looking to impose fuel uplifts beginning tomorrow through Thursday. We may lift those if we can get an additional reservation, but this is strictly for general aviation aircraft only. That's how it's been. Benefit at this time. I think that's all I have with fuel. Anything?
The uplift for the limited uplift for this week, proposed for tomorrow at 7 a.m. through Thursday 10 p.m. is in hopes to, if we cancel it on Thursday, in hopes to just get us through the weekend so we don't have to have that. When we do that, it saves us about 10,000 gallons, 15,000 gallons per job. So which is nice.
So you canceled on but you can't, what do you mean you canceled? Did you cancel?
No, we didn't cancel. No. Well,
You mean you can end it? The term.
Depending on how much we pump today and how much we pump tomorrow, we may be able to cancel that NOTAM that's in place for that uplift earlier than Thursday at 10 p.m. We'll see how much we can save.
Is the policy to just put restrictions on general aviation on the airlines as well?
That is correct. We do it strictly in general aviation. We want to minimize that impact to our commercial areas.
Yeah. And is there a reason that they get preferential treatment of the general aviation customers?
Is that how the policy's been? Just
over the last few years, when Manager Carberg was here, and maybe even Tom Rafter, we've always gone down that road of limiting general aviation corporate jet first. And then last, we would restrict sales of what we're pumping to airlines. We would try to determine what they're taking on a daily basis, and we would completely almost shut down general aviation side and save a certain amount of fuel for the airlines. And then when they're done, we'll save 5,000 gallons for emergencies or med flights, which has happened before.
So, I mean, what I'm hearing is we've always done it that way.
Yeah.
Is there a reason for that policy and has it been revisited at any time?
I don't know if there's an actual policy. I guess I've always viewed it as, you know, our airlines kind of come first as our priority when it comes to fuel.
And I guess I'm asking the question again, why do the airlines always come first?
I don't know the answer.
So, I mean, obviously, somebody has set that policy. Is it worth discussing or revisiting?
Possibly.
I think the whole jet fuel situation needs to be, you know, really further discussed and plan going forward beyond just, we've agreed as part of the master plan, and Mr. Lazzy is still on, that we're exploring additional capacity. But I think there should be a permission discussion as to how much that's gonna be. And we have the capacity, the additional capacity is to buffer us, you know, through these times, but right now, problem is we can't get to. And I still think that's part of the discussion.
I think that's a fun.
That's what we need to then discuss, because I think we put it on the agenda for
We
next.
need to be more proactive with the amount of reservations to get the fuel there. So you should cancel and try to find.
So, and I know we should be careful under just man for on this, but.
I'm sorry.
Don't apologize, because I think this is very important. It is timely and we just want to get, you know, into action on this, but. I was copied last year on our request. We've made multiple requests for more reservations per week, and they were denied by the steamship. That's our biggest issue. We know, well, we've asked for that. What at this point is the more effective way to communicate that need to the decision makers at the steamship? And I know, as we all know, they're busting at the seams as well, and everybody's under these strains, but we need to have a discussion to figure out how we can not be denied our requests. So they made, you know, and I've seen that, I've seen the correspondence. It wasn't just, it was formal requests for, I want to say it was 15 loads a week.
I think it was 16.
16 loads a week, and we got 12, and then like sometimes a 13, and got my memory.
And then we've done that the last 2 years.
Yeah, but, you know, so they said, you know, they at what point do how do we go about that, whether it's correspondence with our steamship representatives?
So I think the answer to your question is that we have to go. You go to the meeting and you sit there and you say, hey, this is what's going on here. This is how you're impacting Nantucket, right? By denying us to get into the fuel, right?
Right.
You know, everybody from general aviation to potentially a med flight, right? And it's being affected by you not giving us.
Let's do this if I could, because I think this is a bigger discussion. We've got some new eyes to help for some input on this. We've got Mr. Lazen that's working on this. Why don't we have an agenda item for next month on jet fuel discussions and how to both overall strategy, and then perhaps there are recommendations that come out in terms of what that volume might be, how we approach the steamship, how that's done, and we can have that as a discussion and some potential action items even. My thought, I think it's timely, because I think that our September meeting, we can have the data to say this is how many times we had to, and the dates we had to implement these restrictions. These are the impacts, you know, to the community, the aviation community, as a result of that, and then go forward with, you know, hard evidence supporting documentation to the steamship. I think that's a very good idea, as well as more might come out of that. So everybody knows we can brainstorm on it a little bit and bring forth whatever materials for that September meeting.
Yeah, I just think it's important that you go and you have to tell the commission, the people, I think the thought commissioners too, or we're told that this is what's going on, because, just being denied a reservation, then they're not.
Well, let's.
And maybe they do, I don't know.
Well, I agree with that, and I think that, and again, we don't wanna just walk in a public comment kind of thing and say that. Instead, let's develop a solid documentation of the requests, of the denials, of the impacts. Make a presentation, ask to be on their agenda. Again, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. These are just some of the thoughts that you're saying that we could all collectively work on. In the public meeting as an agenda item, this is the time I think that we can all work on it. Though in the interim, should you have any ideas that you want to put forward that need to be in the packet or whatnot, and we can maybe come up with a strategy to, hopefully get us some more reservations for next year.
If it's also a calculation on volume, of what's your flow and how much you have, and the storage. Like that's kind of how I did mine. I said, hey, I need this many gallons in my peak season, a day. Can we take those gallons a day? And how many days can I rip it up about? Well, I know we've had ice here for a long time ago, right?
Right, yeah.
There's been no boats for a week. But the potential I could get no gas for a week. How much gas do I have to keep in my tank to keep everybody going? And it's the same kind of a map, well, it's a little different, obviously, but say it like.
And that might help back to towards Mr. Lasden's side of things on master plan and that'll provide two things that provides buffering. Anyway, let's bring all that to the table. Mr. Lasden, if I could, but is that something that you think you might be able to have some materials or ideas to join our discussion in September?
Sure.
Thank you. So they try to give you advance on that. It doesn't have to be, we're not looking for engineer drawings or anything of that sort, but looking at, some of our space requirements, areas, how we might start thinking about what might have to happen, permitting, environmental, and what our implications would be easy to say, oh, we need another 100. What does that mean, right? For the reality, okay, you put 3 tanks in and that, what might be that balance? Any thoughts on that? I think if you had a little time to look at it, it would be helpful.
Okay.
And that's you have what you need under your current contracts with us for that kind of work.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
I'm just curious, do we have space limitations there where they are now, the tanks? Is there a big space limitation there?
As far as adding an additional tank, I think we have the space
For
for an additional jet tank.
Which is something, just.
The current ones are 25,000 gallons or gallons. It may not be a 25,000 gallon tank, or maybe it's half. But there's space.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was getting
Yeah.
at too. There might be
You're gonna vote.
there might be low hanging fruit.
Right,
And then there might be a bit level A and level B, but if we, I think, start all of that discussion as an agenda item, I think we're in the right direction, hopefully for next season. This is the way we should, be operating, and that's not in any way cast in stone.
Yeah, no.
That's an operational, just.
Just stick with the throne to this point. We need to
Yeah, and how do
figure out it,
we,
make sure.
how do we
we
make
have
it work better?
It may be worth bringing in Havin Fuller from World Fuel for his input as well.
Yeah, if you think that's helpful, then I would say please invite them
And at least he can join online.
to the discussion. Yes, please. And likewise, so she give them a little primer to that. This isn't the grill. It's just we're looking for input on how they, any advice as we make other suggestions too that you might have.
Usually when you tell a vendor you want to pull down on them, the profit, they show up.
Okay.
All right, moving forward, just kind of on the topic of policies, procedures, brought up Mr. Weather. Since I've come on board last 5 months, new, of course, and seeing that most of my staff are pretty new in the position, there definitely is a need to have these documents and policies updated. Some of them are a little outdated. Some of them, of course, need some tweaking. And just with the current situation that we're in with the grant assurances, I do feel that there is an area in our airport administrative personnel manual that needs an updating right away, and it's in the equal opportunity employment statement. I feel it would be best if it was revised to say, quote, is committed to compliance with all federal anti-discrimination laws, close quote. So I do want to bring that to your attention. I don't know if that means a vote or anything, but I just bring that I'd like to have that updated right away. In the middle of that. And that's all that I have for the operations updates. Moving on to statistics. Statistics operations are up 6% for June and up 11% year to date. Southwest ramps ops, those are up by 2.6% for this last month, for the month of June, sorry. Employments are up 8% for the month and 8% year to date. JetBlue was down 71% for June. They were up 6% for Boston with a load factor of 73%. To Reagan, they were down 37% with a load factor of 78%. White Plains, they were up 31%, load factor 61%. JFK up 50% with a 70% load factor. And LaGuardia was down 80%, the load factor of 80% on the flights. For American Airlines, Charlotte was up 1% with an 87% load factor. DCA was up 15% with a 65% load factor. LaGuardia was up 228% with a load factor of 81%. Philadelphia up 71% load factor, and Chicago up 25% with a 95% load factor. So we're doing very well. Going to Chicago, seeing a lot of business and airlines coming from Chicago. Cape Air employments are up 50%. Boston was up 50%. Hyannis was up 51%. And Martha's Vineyard was up 283%, both with a 34%, 26% load factor that I would recommend. Delta JFK was up 77%, load factor 87%. LaGuardia was up 15% with a 93% load factor. And United from Newark was down 87% with a 58% load factor. And Chicago was down 86% with a load factor of 55%. Interesting that United was down from Chicago, whereas American Airlines was destination, which I found really, really interesting. Fuel. Jet A was up 15.9% year to date, also up 11.5% for the past 3 months and up 15% for the previous month. We sold 406,000 gallons, or I'm sorry, roughly 407,000 gallons for June. Roughly 300,000 gallons sold at the FBO, which is a 14.8% increase year to date, and roughly 110,000 gallons sold at the terminal with a commercial air service, which is an 18.6% increase year to date. 100 low lead is up 58.8% year to date and up 28.8% over the past previous 3 months, and up 58.8% for the previous month. In June, we sold 14,500 gallons of low lead. Freight is up 13% and down 6% year to date. Cape Air is up 30%. USPS is up 19% and FedEx is up 10%. Noise complaints for June, we had 15 new complaints, which is a decrease in 21% year to date. There was 1 complaint about AP usage, 5 complaints about multiple overhead aircraft events, 5 complaints received regarding IFR operations, 2 complaints received regarding VFR operations, and 2 complaints for overhead aircraft events at a defined time that we were unable to further investigate due to a software outage at Public View at that time, which has since been resolved. Follow-up to complaints were provided to the 15 out of the 15 components. So all 100% of those were responded to by our environmental coordinator. And 46% APU action entries were occurred, which is down 54% for the last month. 45 initial warnings were given with 95% compliance, and 1 secondary warning was given, and we were pretty shortly thereafter. For personnel report, as the season's coming to an end, we're starting to see some of our seasonal staff starting to head back to college or to their higher education opportunities, and so we want to thank them for their amazing work. As crazy and busy as it was this summer, but it was a very successful summer for them, and we hope to see them again next year to keep us humming along. They've helped me understand the ropes and the process of the airport's this first summer of mine. So now I'm getting a good idea of what's at stake. So that's all that I have for my just report.
Thank you. Any questions?
Any of the complaints were on neighbors along the new tarmac?
I have to look into that. A lot of them were more, I don't think they were right there. They were definitely more down on Okrawa. I want to say is the road. I'm still learning the roads. I want to say it was down there and they were overwhelmed.
Madison might
She might
know
know.
more, but I don't think
She got her
so.
hand up. Go ahead, Ms. Collins.
Yes, please.
I see your hands up. But you are muted.
Hi, sorry, I know somewhat, oh, here, my video is also not working. But yeah, to answer your question, to answer the question, so two were like all the way, East Island, so like east, like Northeast Island. I'm trying near Pulpit, I think is one of the neighborhoods, and then the one that started with an O that you mentioned. But I will say, like, we also get a very high number of complaints from the same address that lives a little north of Surfside. So this person is a very frequent complainant, and to the best of my abilities, I try to thoroughly respond to all of his complaints. Um, some of those complaints are regarding VFR operations, and some of them are regarding IFR operations. But regardless, I try to do a lot of work on explaining why aircraft are flying over his house at certain times, and just like our general practices here.
Thank you.
So I think to answer your question, no direct butters.
No, well, we're building this $50 million noise wall, and we have no complainers over there. Yeah,
Hopefully,
I'm just saying.
hopefully it's because we've let them know
Right.
that it's coming.
Yeah,
And they're being reasonable as well. That's my hope, right? Because it's happening. I also think the ramp management is worth my observation is the.
well, that may be.
I think there's not a lot of those aircraft on that part of the ramp. And from what I can see, again, part of that's pretty well shielded. It's not as easy to see from the gate there. But, I don't notice in my observation, I try to check it out a bit too, that they're live running nearly as much in that position as what's happening on the south ramp itself. I still think there's room for improvement there. The length of time and the AP logs, aren't at this. I'm still hopeful that we can get an automated system in place to sort of track those, start times and run times, because some of them are certainly going on hours still. Which we really hopefully could improve.
Some of that can be the edict time.
Yeah, there's all kinds of factors.
Just as like a lot of times you'll see like the American and somebody's sitting there forever and you're like, oh my, why are they sitting there? Because they can't leave yet because they can't get into where they're going.
That's right.
That's called the edict time, right? So I've run into that myself, but it's like, you have to shut the plane off and come back in an hour because I can't even move, right? So they have to deal with the same thing. And those guys down there, I mean, sometimes.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of factors there, but I was hopeful that for by next season, the more we can automate that data collection. I still think that it's some kind of a coding software. That uses that 1200 arrow, to input the data. But I think that's the next season.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and I'll answer your question, Mr. Biscaron. When we get these DPRs that come through with these IROPs, we kind of know what type of aircraft is coming.
I'm completely satisfied.
Sure.
Yeah.
We have like email addresses of our butters. Like for instance, when we had the vice presidential visit, we brought in 6 C-17s, big planes. They run their APUs, they're loud. You have to park them down there because that's the best space for them. But we were able to let the butters know, look, it's going to be noisy. Here it comes. Just be prepared.
I ran into this one person that told them that they had heard from you and how much they appreciated that.
Good.
So some positive feedback is always.
Yeah, communications, just if you know why and where you get it.
Wait for that.
Are there any commissioners' comments, ideas, or suggestions for the next meeting, or anything else? None. One thing I wanted to bring up was the master plan, which since we put off, I know that it is in its final stages, but given we have a new commissioner, I would certainly welcome and, you know, and encourage that if you have a chance to review that and anybody else for one final look through that, you direct any thoughts or comments back to Mr. Smith, that he can pass them on to our consultants for that. Because come September, it's gonna be those post awards and the presentation and all the consultants putting it out there. It's very much the commission's product. So I think that you know, making sure that, you know, to the extent that if you have any ideas, and get that in there, it might be, it is 11th hour, but you know, it's not over yet, so.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yes,
So
please.
I haven't met your new commissioner. If you'd like to contact me, I'd be more than happy to give you as high level or as in-depth a discussion on the master plan as you'd like.
I appreciate that offer.
Thank you, Mr. Laslin. I appreciate that as well. The other thing, as I mentioned earlier, that I will be signing the UFA grant based upon, one was you can work with council and then their suggestion to promote compliance, as Mr. Smith said, the change to the personnel manual just explicitly state that, you know, the goal that of the commission and the airport is, you know, compliance with all federal anti-discrimination laws. Make that very clear. So I just want to make sure that you are aware of that. I think that's it. With that, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Clancy?
No comment? Of what? I'm sorry.
Aye, say aye.
We're looking for a solid eye to adjourn.
Oh, aye.
Thank you. Mr. Norris. Aaron.
Aye.
Mr. Levitt. Aye. I thank you all.
Thank you.
Keep it coming. Fine.